that pottery is such an incredible art form because it is something that we are interacting with these materials and we have this really intimate relationship with them. And so we're kind of, just exploring the qualities of these materials respectfully and lovingly in our studio, and then we pass them on to somebody who then gets to use it in their house also in a really intimate way. And so it's really, I just really love thinking about how those relationships form through us, even if we're not meeting the people. Hopefully the love that we're putting into these is something that other people will be able to experience intimately.
We try to make pots with a lot of depth that don't just reveal everything all at once. They have layers and layers and layers, and it takes this kind of everyday conversation every morning with a pot to kind of absorb everything. So I think pots are uniquely, unique in that sort of long conversation. It's not like just a one-time experience, but it's...
Mm-hmm. You're sort of experiencing it on different levels of consciousness too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're really studying a pot, and other times you're just holding it and feeling the weight or grabbing it for the 100th time. The local clay is something that we're drawn to because it's such a beautiful material to us in itself. So it's sort of like choosing a dance partner. We're excited to see what happens with sort of the exploration of that material and kind of the give and take that happens. And I think a lot of times some of the pots that we're the most excited about are pots that happen when we're first testing out a new material, because it's all about just trying to find out what that material is good at doing and not as much about, oh, I have this idea that I want to execute. And further on down the line, it becomes a little bit more of a balance between those two things. But I think that that's where a lot of the really exciting things happen, when we're not thinking as much about our own ideas and more just trying to discover something.
Yeah, I think the wild materials, for us, like, they have such a strong voice in themselves. It feels like more of a collaboration, more... because they can be kind of a struggle to work with in a lot of ways, we have to listen to what the clay has to say and not just impose our ideas on it. It's really interactive.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also kind of a starting off point for us too. It's kind of, it gives us a place to go from. When anything is possible, it can almost be hard to figure out what you want to do, but when you kind of start, the first thing is just choosing what material you're going to use, like what limitations you're going to give yourself, and then going from there kind of naturally leads you in a direction.
Well, for us, it's a really long timeline. So, because we have a large kiln that holds about 700 pots that we fire 3 times a year. So, really making one pot kind of takes 4 months because we have to make 700 to make one. So we start by making clay, mixing the clay, screening it, processing the clay, and then that clay often will dry for 2 to 3 weeks depending on the weather. And then the clay, that pot that's going to be that clay, might sit in the clay bin for a while, and then we'll throw a pot, throw a plate, for example. And then for plates, so that they don't warp, we try to slow dry them. So we put them in a damp box and we'll let them dry for 3 or 4 days before we turn it over and carve the foot on it. And then we carve the feet on all of them, and then we wait until we have all of our plates, and then we'll decorate them all at once.
Well, we have 2 things. We put slip over the clay and then glaze over the clay, and sometimes the decoration happens with the slip and sometimes it happens with the glaze.
But we really like the freshness that comes with quantity. So we might make 100 plates, but that might take a little while. We keep them all wrapped up and then slip them all at once so that we can really get into a rhythm and really be free with it. And then depending on what part of the cycle we make that pot in, we let it dry and sit, and then we'll glaze it, and then load it in the kiln, and our kiln fires for about 20 hours and cools for a few days. So we're really, we're making, all the pots are unique, but they're sort of made communally, I guess would be a way to say it. So we both do all parts of the process. And
yeah, so we both throw and hand build and slip and decorate the pots and experiment on the clay bodies that we're using. But there are certain forms or decorations that one or the other of us tend to do. Like I do most of the iron and wax resist decorations, and Michael does most of the sort of brushy hakame slip decorations. So we'll pass pots back and forth to each other, copy each other, riff on each other, criticize each other. So the design process even is definitely a collaborative.
And we each have specialties. Like, for example, I make more of the dinner plates, and Naomi might make more of the mugs. And so I might make some dinner plates, and we'll talk together, like, should we do slip on these or wax resist on these? And if we decide to put wax resist on some of them, I give those to Naomi to do wax resist on. And as she might make a whole run of mugs, and then we'll kind of talk about how many of them do we want with this pattern. And then she'll say, oh, can you do some of that brushy slip stuff that you do on these? And we hand stuff back and forth. But the other thing that happens a lot is, Naomi might do something on a small plate, and I really like that, and then maybe make a platter and just try to do it the same. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I can't, and then I'll give it to her, or we both.
Or it'll just be a little slightly different.
Yeah. I think influential teachers and artists definitely were my teachers. Like Will Ruggles and Douglas Rankin were mentors that had a tremendous influence. And I was able to take a lot of great classes at Penland with a bunch of really amazing teachers. Like I had a couple of classes with Michael Simon, who was really influential. Ron Myers and Clary Ilian both taught while I was at Penland. So I really lucked out and was able to work directly with a lot of people that I admired. And Oh Hyung Jung was my teacher in Korea, who was an amazing Korean potter.
But artists that we like to look at, a lot of abstract expressionists like Franz Klein and Rothko and Richard Serra, just his kind of giant monoliths.
Richard Serra, his 2D work has been really influential in a lot of our recent patterns.
Brancusi and his sculptures are definitely.
I think living in North Carolina to us is inspirational on a lot of levels. One is living near Penland, where there's so many great potters, so we have a really great community of potters in this area. And also the materials. So since we're using a lot of local materials, we're affected. We're trying to interact with those materials, which really inspire the work. And even besides the pottery, I think the landscape and the natural world around us seeps into our work in ways that we might not even know. But the other thing is that North Carolina has such a long tradition of making pots, which we're so lucky to have here. Further east in North Carolina, there's such a great tradition of making traditional ash glazed work and salt glazed pots that was a never-ending tradition. It never stopped. So there's a thread from the historical potters to the contemporary potters that's somewhat unique to North Carolina.
When we're not making pots, we're in a klezmer band, actually, which is Eastern European Jewish folk music.
Oh.
And I play the fiddle, and Michael plays the cymbal, which is like the Yiddish hammer dulcimer. And we like to go hiking and just be outside a lot.
We have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old that we are chasing around most of the time when we're not making pots. We like to cook.